Hello and welcome back to the Google Workspace Update podcast from Strawberry 7. My name is Adam.
And my name is Adam.
We're here to bring you the latest updates of everything happening in the world of Google Workspace. This podcast is available in audio format from your regular podcast provider and also in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/strawberry7.
Coming up on the show today,
we have 7 updates for you today, and I just wanted to say we're actually recording this podcast a day early than normal, so we're recording it on a Thursday rather than a Friday, so you might see some sort of slightly larger podcast next week, because we might have a few more updates for you, but because of Adam and I's scheduling, we've had to record on Thursday today. But we still have 7 updates for you, and those updates are to Google Drive, Docs, Meet, Admin, Sheets and Slides in one update, Meet and Docs. So we've got quite a lot of sort of Meet and Docs in there. As always, there is a link in the podcast or video description to the document that we read from. This document contains more detailed information, relevant links, lovely pictures, and even some moving graphics showing you all of these features in action. So let's get to it.
on with the show. Right, so first up this week we have a Google Drive update. Update-lit even. So optimizing the Google Drive Android app for foldable devices. And we've kind of mentioned these devices previously. However,
once or twice.
Just once or twice. But in the documents this week, we have a picture of them so we can actually see what they look like for anyone that was not sure. So for this update with Google Drive, when using the Drive app on a foldable device, you'll notice the controls within the item preview viewer will intelligently respond to which position the foldable device is in, such as whether it's opened, closed, or only partially opened, and adjust accordingly. I think the partially opened part of this is actually quite interesting. So it does sound like if you just have it opened maybe at 45 degrees or something like that, then instead of it just being what's the right word? Well, it's done something intelligent to adjust for that, so then you just see a much smoother interface instead of just a hard crease, essentially, in your screen.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Adam. Yeah, and I think that's why they've included the pictures this time, isn't it? To give people a bit of a better idea of what that looks like when the screens are in those different positions. So for anybody listening, on the document, it's kind of got a device which... I think it's actually the same device, isn't it? It's just in three different...
I think so, yeah. I think it's a foldable phone.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, so it's the same device in 3 different positions. So the first position it's in, it's just like a regular smartphone, and it's folded backwards on itself. So you're looking at the screen. The other part of the screen would sort of be on the back of the phone, if you like. The next one, it's just folded out flat, and then the next one, it's sort of folded in half. So think of like a laptop. It's sort of one screen is the bottom part.
It's a bit like a book. So the first picture is the front cover of a book. The second picture is with your book just open, reading the pages, and then the third picture is where the book is partially open. Yeah,
that's right, Adam. Yeah, absolutely. So I wonder if with this, it's kind of going on from what you were saying about it sort of using the image so that you don't see the crease. I wonder if it's actually sort of creating a little bit of an optical illusion so that when you're looking at this, say, in the partially open position, it is actually... sort of looking correct because it's distorting the image slightly, maybe.
Possibly, obviously, without the actual device in front of us and us essentially being able to have a fiddle and look really closely to see what's actually going on, we won't tell. But from what we can see and what has been described with this update, then I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the pictures do a pretty good job, but there's nothing beats having the device in front of you, right? So, lovely. Thank you, Adam. We haven't really got any other information about availability or release, but I think we've taken from most of these where they've been talking about these foldable devices before that it's sort of available across the board, and it's more that you're using one of these foldable devices rather than what tier you're on or anything like that, isn't it?
Absolutely, and yeah, so because this was update LUT category, the same as the next update as well, by the way, there were 2 update LUTs this week, then these updates should be available now, pretty much now for everyone.
Perfect, that's brilliant, Adam. Thank you. What have we got next then?
up next is a Google Docs update. And so you can now view documents in paginated mode on Android devices. So a little bit similar to the devices we were just talking about. Documents will now be in paginated mode upon first open unless the document is set to pageless. This will set up your Google Doc with pages and page breaks in the app, enabling a more cohesive visual design between web and mobile. So I just want to say on this, before doing this podcast, I don't think I had ever used the word paginated before. But now I feel like I'm saying it every single week.
It's funny you should say that, because there are some words that pop up on these Google updates that I think, what on earth does that mean? And it's, they do like to use some quite fancy pants words. So I think they're showing off, they want to just put some really technical, sort of exciting words in there so that people go, what does that mean? And look it up on Google, of course. So it's all a big conspiracy. Cool. Well, that's good. I mean, there's a picture here, but I don't think it particularly shows the feature very much, unless I'm missing something in the picture. It just looks like a screenshot of Google Docs to me. But I think the description that you've given there is fairly useful for people to be able to imagine what this is going to do.
I must admit, I actually thought that this was a standard already, because it's basically saying documents will now be in paginated mode unless you've already specified that you want it to be in pageless. Is that not just the case already?
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. Yeah. I think, if I had to guess, I think it's maybe a more visual thing, but I agree with you. I kind of
They did mention Android devices, so this is kind of specific to Android. Again, we're not really Android users ourselves, so we don't necessarily have a fair comparison. So maybe it was slightly different on Android devices prior to this update.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, any listeners who are used to using Android devices, please drop us a comment or anything. We'd be very interested to hear from you about that experience. And especially if you're on our video podcast as well, it's really useful if you drop a comment in for anyone else watching the video to be able to have some of that information. Thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
So up next, we have a Google Meet update. So experience better collaboration in conference rooms with new support for whiteboard cameras on Google Meet hardware. Using a whiteboard during a brainstorming session is a great way to problem solve as a group. However, in today's hybrid work environment, it can be difficult for those attending a meeting in person to collaborate with their remote colleagues on a whiteboard. So this is talking about a physical whiteboard, not a Jamboard or something virtual within the meeting like that. To improve upon the experience, provide better meeting inclusion and foster greater collaboration, Google is excited to announce support for whiteboard cameras on Google Meet hardware with Logitech Scribe as the first supported camera. This will enable the content written on a physical whiteboard in a room to be shared as a presentation in a meeting using the Logitech Scribe. As a result, remote meeting participants will be able to see what is being drawn on a meeting room whiteboard. An updated touch controller UI will allow users to easily share the in-room whiteboard upon selecting the Present to the Meeting button, followed by the new whiteboard camera option. This feature makes it easier to share what's on a whiteboard with everybody in the meeting, regardless of location, so that they can collaborate more effectively. The Logitech Scribe is the first whiteboard camera to be certified for use with Google Meet hardware in the new category of content cameras. Additional partnerships will be explored to expand content camera support, and Google will make an announcement if and when they become available.
Wow, what a really, really cool feature, and what a cool idea. I tell you what this makes me think of, Adam, is some of those projectors which were around for a little bit, and I really don't understand why they weren't more popular. I think they failed, but well, failed is probably too harsh a word. They weren't as popular as they could have been. I don't think because there was anything wrong with the technology or the idea. I just don't think a lot of people got it, and they didn't market them particularly well. But the way these projectors used to work was you could stick the projector on the wall and you could effectively put it above a physical whiteboard. So when we say that, we mean a dry wipe whiteboard. No technology whatsoever, just a normal physical dry
A
white.
traditional whiteboard.
Yeah, an old school whiteboard. You
Use
could
a chalkboard if you prefer.
Yeah, absolutely. You could stick the projector above that, and what it would do is it would project an image onto the whiteboard. Okay, nothing fancy there. But when you used a pen and you wrote on the whiteboard, let's say, or you wrote something on the whiteboard, it would sort of project. It would change the image, wouldn't it, Adam, to project what you were writing. Now, you may think to yourself, well, why not just write on the whiteboard with the pen? But obviously the big advantage of doing that is, A, you've then got a digital record of what you've written, because I think it would somehow connect to some software or something so that keep a record of it. But the other cool thing was that you could obviously project other things onto there. You could kind of project pictures, and you could project different bits and pieces, because you'd still have it like connected. I think you'd still have it connected to a computer to sort of project stuff onto it. But it's a really cool idea. I saw them in action a few times, and I thought, wow, for schools who can't afford $4,000 or whatever to put in a full touchscreen whiteboard with a display and everything like that, or at the time just an interactive whiteboard that then went with a projector anyway, it was a really good kind of like cheap option for schools to put that in with a whiteboard.
Absolutely. So it looks like this device is at around about the £1,200 price point at the moment, and there's a couple of features of this that I do think is really cool. So there's a built-in AI with this device. So for anyone wondering, it essentially looks like a camera on a stick that you just mount on your wall that's directly in front of your whiteboard. And one of the things that the AI does is that it will almost ignore you as the person drawing on the board. So it will only focus on the content. So you will still be visible, but you almost look a bit like a ghost, really. So then everyone else on the meeting will actually be able to see through you and just see the content that is being created on the board. The other thing is that the AI will enhance whatever it is that you're drawing on the board. So if it is just on a whiteboard with a pen, and maybe you've rubbed out some old content and there's like some old smudge marks or something like that, the AI will just completely ignore that. So then you'll be left with a really nice clean image that everybody is actually working with. And another feature of this, which I do think is quite cool, I think it does just come with the hardware. When you purchase it, you get a magic button, and we do like magic buttons. And what this button does, it is the essentially present this whiteboard within the meeting button. So then you don't have to faff about with anything else. Literally press this button, and then you will start. You will then present to this whiteboard within your meeting. However, the slight caveat on that is the compatibility of this magic button. So the magic button is compatible with Zoom and Microsoft Teams and some other platforms, but it's actually not compatible with Google Meet.
Oh dear.
That one feature is not, presumably because Google Meet is online only, whereas the other platforms are using locally installed software, and so then there'll be some setting and configuration set up to enable that to work in the first place. So the magic button, as cool as it is not compatible with Google Meet, but the rest of the features should be.
It does talk in this update about Google Meet hardware as well, so I wonder if that magic button would be compatible with Google Meet hardware rather than Google Meet.
I don't think it is, because I've got the compatibility list open right in front of me, and it says no next to Google Meet, unfortunately. Okay. But you mentioned Google Meet hardware, so this is a Google Meet hardware update. So to me, that suggests that you actually need to be within your Google Meet meeting using Google Meet hardware, not just a traditional Google meeting just online, just like the one we're on right now, and then you happen to have an additional camera such as this that you could use. So I don't think it is quite like that, which I think is a bit of a shame. They've almost missed a trick, really, if they haven't just allowed that. So I think you must be within a Google Meet meeting using Google Meet hardware, and this camera can be an additional piece of hardware to incorporate into your meeting.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Adam, and maybe we'll see that in a future update. We'll see it sort of incorporate more into Google Meet mainstream, which would be really nice. I mean, the picture is well worth having a look at the document, because the picture shows you, as Adam said, what the device actually looks like. and it's very Logitech. It's very sleek. It's a very nice looking device. I think it looks really cool. It's very discreet. Kind of looks like a lamp. Kind of looks like a modern lamp that's been stuck on the wall. Actually, I think it's
Literally, it's a camera on a stick. So that makes it that sound a bit more underwhelming than it actually is. Because at first I thought, oh, well, that's quite an expensive camera. £1,200 essentially for a camera on a stick. However, when you take into consideration the AI intelligence and the features as a whole, then I think it's not actually that bad, to be fair.
No, and compared to, I think it's pretty comparable to what we've seen with the other Google Meet hardware. I mean, we were pretty shocked when we saw some of the cost of some of the Meet hardware, not because it's overpriced, just because we didn't realise how fancy some of the hardware was. So if you're looking at some of the Google Meet hardware, which goes up, I think, from memory, like to $7,000 or $8,000 or something like that, then, £1,200 or $1,200, whatever it is for this, is not going to be too expensive. And if you're used to presenting on a whiteboard, or you're doing that regularly on the meetings, I think this is going to be a really, really good investment to just remove one of those barriers because Jamboard and everything is okay, but trying to draw on your touchpad or anything, or even with a mouse is.
Imagine if you're on a laptop. How are you supposed to? And you're just on the trackpad on your laptop, and you don't have any fancy hardware essentially to make it easier. Especially if you just want to draw something as simple as a circle. Obviously, I've not tried to do it recently, but. But I kind of recall back in the day, if I wanted to draw just a circle in like Microsoft Paint or something on the trackpad on a laptop, what came out did not look like a circle. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's very difficult to draw a circle with your hand, let alone your hand on a trackpad. So, I think it's very cool. I think it's a very, very cool update. Very good idea of Logitech to bring this out. I think it's a really, really nice piece of hardware. Very, very nice. I think there's a bit about getting started here, isn't there, Adam? Yes, so to get started for the admins, there's no admin control for this feature. However, admins will have the option of setting a default whiteboard camera in the admin console if they want to receive alerts when it goes offline. To set a default peripheral camera, you can go to Menu, Devices, Google Meet Hardware, and then Devices. Some features may require the Manage Devices privilege for the Google Meet hardware. In the Connected Peripherals section, select the peripheral that you want to set as the default, and then click Set as Default. And all of that, presumably, would be within the Google Admin Console. To get started for the end users, there is no end user setting for this feature, but in order to use the whiteboard feature, a Logitech Scribe must be plugged in to a Google Meet hardware device, which is kind of what we were discussing moments ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So that sort of confirms that you need a Google Meet hardware device there. Quite interesting that you can get notifications as an admin if it goes offline. That's pretty useful, actually. So it's good of them to think about that. What's the rollout phase here and sort of availability?
So rapid release and scheduled release, there is a gradual rollout, so potentially up to 15 days for everybody to, see this feature, just be for the feature to become available. That is starting on June the 19th, and this is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers with Google Meet hardware kits with touch controller support and Google Meet hardware devices that have not yet reached their auto update expiration date. So if you've got some Google Meet hardware, as long as it's still receiving updates, then this should be compatible as long as you do have the other requirements, such as the actual camera to go with it.
Yeah, of course, yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much, Adam. That's really useful to know. What have we got next, please?
Next up, we have an admin update. So, use directory sync to replace the domain name for synced users. Using directory sync, admins can automatically replace the domain name for synced users and groups in their Google Cloud directory. This means synced Google users and groups can have a different domain name than the domain used in the external directory following a sync. Verified domain names within your Google Workspace account can be used to replace user and group domain names. Admins can specify whether the domain change will occur for newly synced users and groups, or new and previously synced users and groups. Directory sync is available as an open beta, meaning no sign-up is required, and you can also use Google's Help Center to learn more about using the directory sync and any FAQs, and I've added a couple of links within our document for those for anybody that would like to learn a bit more about this.
Thank you, Adam. That's super useful. When you were reading this, I didn't quite get it, but then suddenly the penny dropped. I sort of understood what it was referring to.
I don't think the penny has quite dropped for me, so so please elaborate.
I'll do my best to explain this, and I might be wrong. When it first started talking about directory sync, you see, I got a little bit fixated thinking it was talking about sort of the directory within the Google admin console within your own company, when it's talking about more like contacts, almost imagining like contacts. So when you go to share something in Google Drive, for example, and you type in someone's name, that's doing like a directory lookup. I think what this is talking about, I might be wrong here, but I think what this is talking about, I have to zoom into the picture a little bit. I think what it's saying, yeah, it is. What it's saying is that if you have a sync turned on with your Google system that's syncing with an external directory system in order to import users. A good example is what we're doing with LGFL. So we have a sync set up with most of our customers with LGFL, and which is London Grid for Learning, that supports most of the schools that we take care of in terms of their internet services and things like that. And one of the things that they do is within schools there's what's called an MIS. In America I think it's called a SIS. So that stands for Management Information System here in the UK. All of the data, that's like your source of truth. All of the data gets fed into there about staff and students, and then there's various services that use that data to then populate their own systems. So LGFL uses that data to then populate the student and staff into the LGFL system. And then LGFL does a sync to Google, in our case, to populate Google with the information. So I think what this is saying is that LGFL take care of that in the background for us, and I think they have their own kind of custom API because LGFL is very, very big and they've got their own development team. I think what this is saying is if you don't have that and you've just got Google's basic directory sync system turned on, where you're syncing with an external directory system, you can, with now sort of one click in the system, replace the domain. And that is super, super useful, because in the direct example that I was talking about with LGFL, all of our users are on LGFL, but they're at lgflmail.org or at lgfl.net. So we can't use that domain because it's being used for the whole of London, for all the schools in London. So we have to use the school's domain, but when the users come in, we want to grab the first part of the username, but then just change the domain. So if we didn't have LGFL doing some kind of custom wizardry in the background, this update would be super handy for us, and I can definitely see a lot of use cases for this.
I see. That is really interesting, actually. I thought this may have been something along the lines of, I would say you've got this group of users and you just want them to use a different domain. Like maybe you have a subdomain or something along those lines. But essentially, this update is doing what LGFL does for us already. So, but obviously, if LGFL was not available, or for anybody else that would like to do something similar, 1,000,000%, this update would be super helpful within that situation.
Yeah, you're completely right, Adam. And I was thinking exactly the same thing. I was thinking, it's like you're going through the users you've already got in your system and you're changing their domain. I thought, that's got to be rare, surely, that you're going to do that. Maybe as part of a migration or something. But no, it is talking about bringing them in on a sync or something like that. And I agree with you, Adam. If we didn't have LGFL doing that, this would be a godsend. So I'm sure there's at least one person listening to this, hopefully, who's going, oh my God, finally, I can...
Maybe LGFL are listening to this and they'll just think, okay, well, we can get rid of that person in that department now because Google will automatically just do it.
Possibly, yeah. I don't want to be responsible for putting anybody at LGFL out of the job. No, that's a very, very nice update. There's a bit about getting started here, obviously, for how the admins set this up, right?
Yes, so for the admins, to use the directory sync, go to the admin console, home, directory sync. And from within there, then you can set it up as required. You can also visit Google's Help Center to learn more about replacing the domain name for your synced users. And as always, I've added a link to that within our document. And for the end users, there is no end user impact. So this is definitely for the admins.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. It's even an admin update, isn't it? So that makes complete sense. Thank you, Adam. And what's the rollout and availability here?
So, rapid release and scheduled release. This is available right now for everybody. And this is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers.
Wow,
which is lovely to see. So another user with a personal Google account will take full advantage of this, I'm sure.
Exactly, on their admin console that they can't have access to. Yeah, absolutely. Google,
but it's great that this is actually available to everybody and not just to a higher end tier or something like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, because it's nice to see that across the board, because there are a lot of people, I'm sure, who will be using that directory sync, even if they're on Business Standard or something like that. So it's good to see that availability. Another Ferrero Rocher update from Google, Adam. If you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, listen back to our previous podcast for all the hilarity of that joke. Okay, what have we got next there, Adam?
Up next, we have a Google Sheets and Slides update. So, add or remove client-side encryption from Google Sheets and Google Slides files. So you can now simply add or remove client-side encryption to existing spreadsheets in Google Sheets or presentations in Google Slides. This update gives you flexibility to control encryption as your documents and projects evolve and progress. This feature is already available for Google Docs, and I think we mentioned that very recently. Was that last week or the weekend? Weekend? We very recently covered that update within this podcast, and so it looks as if the same thing has now come over to Google Sheets and Google Slides.
Yeah, you're right. I think we did cover it in one of our previous podcasts, and we won't dwell on it too much because it's pretty self-explanatory from what it says, but we've seen a lot of updates around this client-side encryption. Google are really, focusing in on this, I think, and doing a lot of different sort of updates for it, a lot of support. I'm wondering how exclusive Google is in this field of doing client-side encryption. Are Google playing catch-up here with Microsoft, with 365? Is this something that Microsoft has offered for a long time? Or
are they getting ahead of the curve?
Yeah.
Literally, Google, which side of the field is it?
Yeah, is Google a bit of a pioneer here with this client-side encryption? Either way, I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just a bit of interest for me. I think client-side encryption is fantastic. We've talked a lot before about how it really helps people, really helps with the compliance, especially in America, I think. I think there's a lot of requirements for our American listeners to have regulatory requirements and things that they have to meet federal law about client-side encryption. So it's great to see that coming through with a bit more control and just that easy ability to be able to turn it off if you're in the example here where somebody's copying the Google Sheet. I assume there's going to be some control over this because I guess admins might not want people to be able to turn off the client-side encryption. So tell us a little bit about the getting started here, Adam.
Okay, so for the admins, client-side encryption can be enabled at the domain, OU, and group levels. And in order to do that, you'd go to the admin console, security, access and data control, and then client-side encryption. You can also visit Google's Help Center to learn more about client-side encryption, link in the document. For the end users, if client-side encryption is enabled by your admin, it says here that you can use Google's Help Center to learn more about working with encrypted files in Docs, in Drive, Docs, Sheets and Slides, link in the document. However, from the graphic that we have included within this podcast in the document that we have, you can see that within Google Sheets or Slides, you can navigate to File, make a copy, and then select Add or Remove Additional Encryption. So as you just alluded to, and as we had mentioned in previous podcasts as well, it looks as if you do not just remove the encryption from the one file, you create a copy, and it's that copy that either does or does not have the encryption.
Yes, I think, I can absolutely see that. I think you're absolutely right there. I would have liked there to have been a little bit about how admins could prevent users from doing this, because with my admin hat on, I'm thinking if I've enabled client-side encryption across my domain, there might be the requirement from the owner of the business or the CTO or somebody like that to say, right, everything on our system has to have client-side encryption on, and I would like to see some admin control to say that users can't turn that off or can't disable that.
Yeah, see, it does say here that the client-side encryption can be enabled, or does that imply that it is disabled by default? But it doesn't directly say that. We have seen it on many previous updates. It's where it will say this feature is off by default, and you can enable it by going here. This one does not say it quite as black and white as that, but it does say it can be enabled. So then, with that strain of thought, it can also be disabled.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense that it's disabled by default, because when you enable it, you kind of have to tell it what encryption system you're using and what encryption system you want to put on. But the trouble is, the getting started is more, like you've said, Adam, it's more about turning client-side encryption on rather than talking about this update, which is actually then being able to make a copy of a file without it. So I would have liked to have seen Google. I think it's great that Google have put in how to turn client-side encryption on, but I would have liked to have seen something a little bit more specific to this update from them. There is a link there, as Adam said, about learning more about client-side encryption, and there might be some more details in there about whether you can turn this off so that users can't duplicate files with client-side encryption off. If you are using client-side encryption in your business, then do have a look at these links and do have a look there, because, like I said, with my security hat on, I would be thinking to myself, I want to be able to control whether my users can do that or they can't do that. So maybe we'll see some updates about that in the future. Obviously, Google's listening with bated breath to everything that we say. We've already established that in the past that they're listening to us. So, if Google, you want to put some more admin controls around this, I think I'd be very welcome from admins to prevent people being able to do this. I'd even like to see it down to the level of shared drives and things like that. So it's like, I want people to, in this shared drive, to be able to make copies of files and turn client-side encryption off, but not on these other shared drives. Finance drive, no. Operations drive, yes, for example, something like that.
That's a really good thought, actually. Yes, a very valid point. And yeah, as you say, I'm sure Google is listening, but as you well know, it's so rare that we ever hear about client-side encryption, so we probably won't hear another update about it, or who knows, maybe we'll just repeat it for the next 50 episodes.
I think it's probably the latter. What's the rollout pace and availability here as well, Adam?
Okay, so rapid release, there is a gradual rollout, which started on June the 13th. Scheduled release, there is also a gradual rollout, which is starting on July the 5th. So there's a little bit of time for that. And this update is going to be available to Google Workspace Enterprise Plus, Education Standard, and Education Plus customers.
Great. So just like we've seen before with this client-side encryption, it's very nice that they've, although it's right at the top tier for businesses, which we talked about before, I do think it's a little bit too high, Enterprise Plus personally. It's very nice to see it at Education Standard. So for education customers, they've sort of lowered it a little bit. Lovely. Thank you very much, Adam. What have we got next, please?
Up next, we have another Google Meet update. So, Google Meet expands language support for closed captioning and translated captions. So, to make Google Meet more inclusive, Google has expanded support for closed captioning to include French Canadian, Indonesian, Polish, Romanian, Thai, Turkish, and Vietnamese. French Canadian is web only and with support for mobile coming soon. Google has also added additional languages for translated captions. you can now translate meetings spoken in English into Dutch, Indonesian, Turkish and Vietnamese. The newly supported languages will be denoted with a beta tag as Google continues to optimize performance. And a little bit more on this. Google has also removed the beta tag from the following closed captions languages as they have been validated and are now out of beta. So that includes Dutch, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese and Russian.
Wow, what a cool update this is. I really think that the translation feature of Google Meet in this regard with captioning that's just so powerful. If you've got different people across the world and they're speaking different languages, how useful is it going to be to have translation built in? I mean, Google have always been like the king of translation in my opinion. Google Translate was just around for such a long time before anybody else, well, not before anybody else got in the arena, but before anybody else in a modern way got in the arena. You know, Google
before
Translate,
anybody else did it well.
Yeah. That's a really good point, Adam. I mean, the Google Translate was just so good. You know, it was just awesome. It's not perfect, obviously, but for most things, it's just so handy. I've used Google Translate, and I know other people have as well. When I visited France and things like that, I've used Google Translate to type in what I want to say and then say it to somebody in French and then they say it back. I have to say, the iOS Translate that uses Siri, that is super handy as well. My partner's used that in the hospital, translating to a patient who spoke another language, and it's amazing because you can say something, then Siri says it in that language, they say something back in that language, and then Siri says it back to you in English. So I think these captions and the live translation, really, really cool. I think this is just a fantastic update, and great that they've expanded it to these different languages.
Absolutely. I know that this update is more to do with all the languages within Google Meet, but you were just touching on just Google Translate. I love it. The one feature that I use, I say all the time, I wish I had the opportunity to use it all the time, is that you can download a language to your phone, and then there's a live translation available that you can use through your camera. So therefore, if you're at an airport, if you're traveling abroad, just going anywhere where there is a language that you don't understand, hold your camera in front of it and it will just translate it live in front of you. So especially if you're at the airport, you're not sure where to go, or if you're being a tourist abroad in another country, it is just so helpful to use that. And we use it all the time or within our schools as well. That there's many students that have English as an additional language, so using this even just to hold over a worksheet or something, so to translate it into their own language, it's so helpful. It really is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's called Google Lens, that system that uses the camera and translates across. I mean, for anybody who listens to the podcast regularly, thank you very much. You'll know that I was in Germany not all that long ago, and didn't interrupt my podcast duties. Come hell or high water, we will always deliver the podcast to you, even when I'm on holiday. And we were in Germany recently, and we used that all the time, looking at the menus and things like that. It was interesting actually, because we used the Apple one, because Apple's is now built into the camera on iOS, and when we saw that, we thought, oh my god, that's so cool, we won't even need to use the Google app, we won't need to use Google Lens. It was nowhere near as good as Google Lens. It was okay, but it was nowhere near as good as Google Lens. The other cool feature with that as well is the fact that you can take a picture of that thing and then translate it later, which I know sounds a little bit weird. You think, why would you want to do that? But there are certain situations where it's very, very handy to sort of grab that picture, and then later on you can go, oh, what did that say? And you can translate it afterwards. So yeah, we're getting slightly off of this update, I realise, but
Google Meet.
I completely agree with you, Adam. That Google Lens feature, whatever it's called, is really, really useful when you're travelling around. And this feature on Google Meet is great. the translation on the captions and and just the closed captioning as well, which is actually the main part of the update, the fact that they've expanded the closed captioning. Very interesting that it says French Canadian is web only, with support for mobile coming soon. Wonder why that is. I wonder why it's only web only at the moment.
Yes, although I must admit I don't actually understand what's the difference between French Canadian and just French.
Oh, well, thanks, Adam. We've just lost all of our Canadian listeners. I don't know. I would imagine it's a sort of variation of... It's kind of, I suppose, similar to English and American English. You know,
actually, yeah, that does make perfect sense. Actually,
yeah. English we speak properly.
Please forgive my ignorance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. English we speak properly. American English not so much. So no, I'm only joking. Most of our listeners are in America. Please don't stop listening to the podcast. I'm only joking. So yeah, what's the getting started on this? And I think there's a bit about meeting participants here as well, isn't there, Adam?
So to get started for this, for the admins, there are no admin controls for this feature. For the end users, the features will be available by default, which is great. You can also visit Google's Help Center to learn more about captions and translated captions within Google Meet, links in our document. For the meeting participants, you can use live translated captions if their meeting is organized by a user with an eligible Google Workspace edition, and closed captions are available for all users, which is great.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. What's the rollout and availability here?
Okay, so rollout is just available right now for everybody, so fantastic. Availability, so for the translated captions, this is going to be available for meetings organised by Google Workspace Business Standard, Business Plus, Enterprise Starter, Enterprise Standard, Enterprise Plus, Education Plus, and the Teaching and Learning upgrade. For the closed captions side of the update, this is available to all Google Workspace customers and also available to users with a personal Google account as well. To be honest, I would have thought that just all of this would be available to everybody, really.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That they've broken out the availability there of the translated captions and the closed captions. Yeah, I'm not too sure why that... Maybe they think that translated captions is a bit more of a business product because you're more likely to be talking to people on Google Meet overseas if you're in a business environment or needing it translated.
It does kind of sound a bit more businessy, but in today's environment, people, it's very common to have friends halfway around the world that do speak another language, and to be honest, most of the world is far better at English than any of us as well. But yes, I'm not too sure what the reasoning for not just making the translated captions side of this update just available to absolutely everybody. But Google, if you're listening, please let us know.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah. Google are definitely listening. Well, their bot is listening, so taking notes. Thank you very much, Adam. What have we got next, please?
Up next, we have another Google Docs update. So, improving table placements in Google Docs. So earlier this year, Google rolled out improvements to the formatting and customization options for tables of contents and reorganized the options included in the table properties sidebar in Google Docs. And we spoke about that update on this podcast as well. I think that was maybe a month or so ago. Now, Google is introducing improved table positioning options for documents set in Pages format. These features add more flexibility and control over the layout of text with tables in Docs, which allows you to drag tables in a document and place them directly where you want, wrap content around a table on a page, the wrap direction, which is left, right, both sides, and margins from the surrounding text can be specified. You can also set a fixed position for a table on a page and provide quick layouts to instantly move a table to a present position on a page. Additionally, and this is the bit that I really like, Google are improving the import-export of Microsoft Word documents with tables so your documents remain consistent.
Oh my goodness! Finally, they might fix those formatting issues that have absolutely plagued our users when they're putting a Microsoft Word document into Google Docs or trying to open it in Google Docs. Tables can just be an absolute nightmare. I agree with you, Adam. Very nice little addition on that update there. This is really lovely, and for anybody listening, there is a moving graphic in the document which shows some examples of the new wrapping options. There's somebody moving a table of contents around, and you can see the new wrapping options. I think whoever's worked on this has done a great job to tick so many boxes here, with thinking about a fixed position on the table, thinking about wrapping the contents around, putting the margins in, and the preset layouts as well. You know, all of those are really, really handy. I've done a very, very good job with this. And you are right, we talked about this table of contents update before. Very, very cool update to be able to put in. And I think it was a smart chip that you could put in from memory. Was it a smart chip that you'd say table of contents, or insert a smart chip that was a table of contents or something like that?
I think it was just an updated an update to the tables that were already there.
My mistake. Okay, so yeah, I think you're
possibly
right. Yeah. You know more about these updates than I do, Adam. That I think it's a great update. I think it's really, really nice little tweak to the features, and the moving graphic here does a great job of showing all of the differences there. Very, very nice. What's the getting started for this, Adam?
Okay, so for the admins, there is no admin control for this feature. For the end users, you can visit Google's Help Center to learn more about adding and editing tables. And as always, link in the document.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, you get most of the information from this little moving graphic and the description that you've given there, Adam. I'd highly encourage anybody interested in this feature to check out moving graphic in the documents. Very, very, very useful. What's the rollout phase here in availability?
Okay, so rapid release, there is a gradual rollout, so up to 15 days for feature visibility, which started on June the 14th. Scheduled release, full rollout, which may take 1 to 3 days, is starting on June the 27th. And this update is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers and users with a personal Google account, so right across the board, available to everyone.
Lovely, that's really nice. I mean, we've seen that before, haven't we, with the Google Sheets updates being available to pretty much everybody, so that makes a lot of sense. Interesting that the scheduled release is on 27th of June. Again, a little bit down the line there, a bit more than we used to.
With some of the updates, such as the admin update that we mentioned in this episode, then you kind of understand why they would have a bit of separation, just to allow the admins time to prepare for the upcoming update and just make sure that they've got all their ducks in a row first. Whereas with this update, then surely it's just sooner the better, because there's no admin control anyway. So I'm not really sure what difference would it make if they just pushed it out to everybody immediately.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some kind of technical reason as to why it's taking a little bit longer, but it's just interesting with these availabilities. Sometimes we read these updates out and it's like, oh, it started being available a week ago from when we're reading the update out, and then other ones it's up to a month ahead of time, or sort of 3 weeks ahead of time sometimes. So just interesting to see it. It's a little bit down the line, but very, very good update. I'm sure a lot of people will be very happy when that comes through. Very, very nice, especially what you said about the formatting of the tables in Microsoft Word. I really want to see that.
For me, that is actually the main takeaway of this update. It's the compatibility between Microsoft Word and Google Docs, because I know that is a barrier. It can be a bit of an issue sometimes that they're not always as smoothly compatible as we would like them to be, and I think it generally is the tables that just misaligns some of the formatting. And if it's, say, like a 20-page document, then it can suddenly become a 30-page document and half the pages are blank and things like this. It would just be nice to be seamless, essentially. Yeah. So I'm really, really hoping that this is a step in the right direction, and I think we might need to test it out, actually. I think all the staff at all of our schools will be very pleased with this update if it does become seamless.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything that you've said. Yeah, really looking forward to seeing what that's like. Right, well, that is it, everybody. That's everything that you need to know about all of the latest updates happening in the world of Google Workspace. Remember that this podcast is available in audio format from your regular podcast provider and also in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/strawberry7. We do actually have some other videos there as well that you can check out if you're interested. It's not just podcast videos, so do please check out our YouTube channel. Thank you very much for joining us this week.
And we'll be back again next week with more updates.
Goodbye.
Bye.